I am Sarah White, a retired director of pharmacy. This short video describes a significant landmark event in pharmacy, the development of specialization through the BPS, the Board of Pharmacy Specialties. It traces the history and stimulus for BPS, the process for specialty approval, how to become certified, its value, and what is required to maintain one's certification. This is an excerpt from William Ellis's conversation with health system pharmacy's most influential leaders. Bill is currently the executive director of BPS. He is a 1985 pharmacy graduate who completed the ASHP executive residency and previously was the executive of the APHA Foundation, in addition to other leadership positions. In his full conversation, he outlines his career evolution, the use of mentors, and advice for young practitioners. Thanks, and I hope you benefit from Bill's expertise and experiences. Let's begin with BPS. Why don't you trace its development and evolution?
Well, the beginning of BPS, or the Board of Pharmacy Specialties, and actually specialties in pharmacy, goes back to some work even in the mid-60s. Paul Parker was beginning to write about the evolution of hospital practice and began to identify that pharmacists were working in specialized areas. So in 1971, the American Pharmacists Association House of Delegates passed a resolution that called for APHA to study specialization in the profession of pharmacy. And so a task force was put together, the APHA Task Force on Specialization in Pharmacy, in 1973. And that group deliberated for about a year, published their report in 1974, and they concluded that the profession of pharmacy should have a body, an independent body, to be able to deal with the issue of specialization, set standards, award those credentials. The group didn't go as far as to say what those specialties should be, but that the profession should have a way to board certified pharmacists in specialty areas. There's also, while that was going on in the early 70s, there was also this groundswell and consideration of specialties. Don Franke had been writing about this, and the Millis Commission report by the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacies also began to identify that there was differentiation in pharmacy practice. So a lot of things really coalesced together at that point that led to the formation of the Board of Pharmacy Specialties in 1976. One of the things it's important, Sarah, to talk about here, because it's held true even today, is that when that task force set about its work, it gathered input from across the professions, various organizations, and it also sought input from outside of pharmacy, medicine and nursing. And to this day, BPS really believes in that philosophical approach to our work, and we try very much to work across the major professional organizations and specialty societies in pharmacy, and routinely draw input from medicine and nursing. So we actually have two positions on our board of directors. One is designated for a nursing representative, and the other is designated for a representative from medicine. So those very principles back in the 70s still hold true today, and I think have served us well.
So what were the first specialties?
So the very first specialty to be recognized was nuclear pharmacy. So that was recognized in 1978. And it made sense at the time. There was a section, APHA had just completed the work of this task force. There was a nuclear pharmacist section within APHA that coalesced around 1975. And there was general consensus across pharmacy that nuclear pharmacy was a unique and specialized area. It required specialized training and skills in dealing with those products and issues related to safety. So that was sort of a natural for BPS to do that and recognize that first specialty in 1978. There was about 10 years before the next specialties were recognized. the next two specialties, both recognized in 1988, nutrition support pharmacy, which was created through a petition from the American Society of Health System Pharmacists, then Hospital Pharmacists, and ASPEN, the American Society of Parenteral and Enteral Nutrition. Also, in 1988, BPS recognized pharmacotherapy based on a petition from the American College of Clinical Pharmacy. So, 10-year gap and then two specialties. And pharmacotherapy today has gone on to become the largest specialty within the BPS structure, with almost 75% of the board-certified pharmacists holding the pharmacotherapy certification.
So once there is a petition, then what all happens around that?
So BPS is believed that, and again, true to our roots, that specialties need to be recognized from the ground up. And so the BPS board, though we have the final decision on whether a specialty is recognized or not, responds to petitions from the profession to recognize a specialty area. So we don't separate out and make that decision on our own. It has to come up organically from the profession. And there were 7 criteria that were identified as part of that original task force in 1974 that have pretty much held true 40 years later today. I mean, it's amazing to me when I go back and I read that task force, the tremendous amount of insight and vision that those individuals had in doing that. Some folks are on that task force. Lloyd Parks was the chair. John Gans was part of that task force, Warren Weaver. So that group did tremendous work. And those criteria still have held up today. And so there's roughly 7 criteria, and they relate to need for the proposed specialty area, demand, and then each specialty has to have a unique body of knowledge that represents the specialty. They have to have unique activities. What kinds of things are those specialists doing that are different than general practice? And then we look at some other criteria. How are specialists trained? So how does the specialty ultimately propagate itself and continue to grow? And are there standards? And is there consistency among that training? Then we look at things like transmission of knowledge. So can we go to the literature and see that there are routine publications and lectures and scholarly work and research around the particular specialty area? So they're the criteria that we generally look at. And so an organization that petitions BPS has to address each of those criteria and make the case that this proposed specialty area meets all of those areas. So that involves quite a bit of work. Usually some kind of analysis, maybe meta-analysis of the literature. Probably also involves some initial or new research, usually survey work. And the other thing that it involves, which is key to specialties, is conducting what's called a role delineation study or a job task analysis. And this is where a group of subject matter experts in the proposed specialty area get together and debate and discuss sort of what would that specialist job description look like, a complete job description, and what is in their purview and what's not in their purview. And that is really a critical step in a valid specialty certification examination. And so that process is conducted. Subject matter experts design the content outline, and then it's validated by surveying pharmacists to practice in the proposed specialty area to see, yes, this is what I do, or no, this is what I don't do. And so the final result of that really results in a content outline for the specialty area. And so it's based on all of that information that BPS makes its decision. And we've consistently always held open hearings for any new specialty, so we get input from the profession itself. We do seek input from those outside of the profession, colleagues in medicine, nursing, employers, hospital administrators, educators, to try to validate the specialty. So it's a pretty extensive process. The average petition probably is somewhere in the range of 450 to 600 pages when it's all said and done. So it's a very complete, exhaustive process.
So once it's approved, what happens then?
So the process takes, well, the role delineation study takes about a year to conduct the role delineation or job analysis. BPS typically in our old bylaws allowed up to a year to analyze and make a decision on those. And in 2012, our board shrunk that timeline to 6 months so that we have a quicker turnaround on those things. And then once the specialty is approved, then BPS, and this was in the original 1974 task force report, appoints a specialty council of 9 members that essentially governs that specialty. So then there's the process for the call for members to serve as that initial specialty council. We have 9 members on our specialty council, and 6 of whom, once a specialty is mature and we've been given the exam, has 6 members who are board certified in that specialty. And then there are 3 other pharmacists on that 9-member council who are not board certified. Obviously, in a new specialty, no one is board certified, but they are subject matter experts in that area. And that's, you know, as we sit here in 2013, that's exactly where we are today as it relates to pediatrics and critical care, which are the 2 most recent specialties approved by BPS. So once that task force is convened, they have to decide on what the eligibility criteria are going to be for the examination. They have to decide what the recertification criteria are going to be. And then they have a huge job in terms of putting together the item bank to begin to test individuals and think about awarding certification in the specialty area.
And the testing is done with outside resources as well, correct?
Yeah, it's a collaboration. So BPS is responsible for building the item bank of valid test questions, and the item bank of test questions is mapped to the content outline. So based on that role delineation study, there's usually 3 to 5 domains per specialty, and we tell candidates, and it's publicly available on our website, that X% of this exam is going to come from domain 1, X% from domain 2. So it's mapped, and the development of exam questions needs to mirror that. But we do contract with outside help and support to administer the exam. We use psychometric consultants, so that helps make sure the exam is valid and legally defensible. So these are individuals PhD trained that study the construct of examinations, proper questions, making sure they're fair, they're not biased, that they really also discern the knowledge level of the individual. So it's a very rigorous process, and so we do contract for outside help. And then the other piece is the actual administration of the exam at testing centers, and so there's an infrastructure of testing centers out there. We contract to make sure that those exam sites are available and accessible to candidates who want to test.
How has the growth in accountability in healthcare influenced accreditation and certification in your view?
Oh, I think that's been a big driver in healthcare. Folks are looking for purchasers, be they consumer purchasers or the government or other employers, are looking for accountability in the delivery of healthcare, and they're looking for some level of assurance that the services that they are purchasing are of sufficient quality. So that's been a general backdrop, I believe, in healthcare. We are really in the era of accountability. I don't think that's going to change. I only think that's going to continue to be ratcheted up. And so the timing of that, I think, worked out very well for BPS. So there's been this natural growth in board certification, and we've seen a lot of trends, particularly on the employer side, related to requiring board certification. And that's also been underpinned not only by employers, which is very important, but we've seen that reflected in the policy of many major national pharmacy organizations who have gone on record saying that pharmacists that are practicing at advanced levels and dealing with complex drug therapy issues should consider or should be board certified. So a lot of this is kind of coalesced at the same time, probably starting, I guess, in the mid-90s, continuing through today, and we don't really see that changing at all. So
talk a little bit about the recertification process, because you need to maintain, if I understand it correctly, your board certification.
Well, that's right. So the certification is not a one-time certification. The other thing, too, I want to back up a little bit, because this is important for folks to understand about our board certification process. Everyone focuses on the examination, and that is critical, and they're the things that people really do think about. But our process to become board certified initially is a multi-step process. So first, you have to make sure you've graduated from an accredited college of pharmacy. You have to have a valid license to practice. But beyond that, and this is the piece that sometimes gets lost, you have to have a certain number of years experience in the specialty area where you're practicing at least 50% of your time or more in the specialty area to be eligible to sit for the exam. And that's important because when we talk to the public and employers, you want to make sure that folks have the knowledge base, and the exam does a good job of testing your knowledge base, but you've got to have the practical experience to apply that knowledge.
Yes.
And that's part of the assurance that BPS certification gives the public and gives employers and other stakeholders in the healthcare system, that the board certified pharmacist has both the knowledge and the experience to do that. And so part of that experience can be tied to residency training. And that's the other thing that's sort of coalesced. The fastest path to board certification eligibility, sit for the exam, is completion of either a PGY1 or PGY2. And that varies a little bit based on specialty, but that generally is your fastest path because those residency programs are structured and they're learning experiences, and they're also accredited by the American Society of Health System Pharmacists. In fact, we only accept residencies that are accredited by ASHP for purposes of eligibility. Now, BPS also realizes that not every individual has the opportunity to participate in a residency. So in that case, there's an alternate path with 3 to 4 years of actual practice experience that you can meet that practice eligibility criteria. So that's the process that gets you there. So once you've gone through that and you've passed the examination, now it's important to hold out to the public and employers again that you are maintaining your knowledge base and the expertise that you've demonstrated up to this point. And so there's two paths there that individuals can use to maintain their certification. The first path is that it's a 7-year recertification cycle, and an individual can sit for a recertification exam at the end of 7 years. And some individuals do that. It's not the majority of folks, probably 15 or 20%, but some individuals do choose that. The other path is to embark upon a series of continuing education activities that are based on the content outlined for the exam and are offered by organizations that BPS approves to be a provider. So all of this coursework is ACP approved, but to count for your recertification of BPS, it has to be through one of the approved providers that are out there, and we designate 1 or 2 providers in each specialty where pharmacists can get that. Now, some folks say, well, you know, with continuing education, shouldn't everybody just recertify by exam? But again, I think what some people forget about the recertification by CE is that individuals must pass a post-test for every continuing education module, which is rigorous. And so they're actually testing multiple times during their 7-year cycle if they choose the continuing education route, because it's at a higher level than the general requirements for pharmacist continuing education. And so that gets you through that process of maintaining your certification over a 7-year cycle.